hits for the bench. Extra attacker coming on to even things up. To the net, Albertson scores!
The Extra Attackers Podcast with Maude and Jordan.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Extra Attackers Podcast. It is our first regular season episode as we are now almost a week into the actual games that matter. Maude and Jordan here once again. How are you doing, Jordan?
I'm good. How about you, Maude?
I'm doing really good. So excited that hockey is back. The first month or so of the regular season, I think, other than the first round of the playoffs, is honestly the most exciting to me because, teams are a little bit rusty. A lot of the games are really chaotic and we get some absolutely wild things happening. And there's going to be lots of that to go over today, right?
Oh yeah, no, I'm excited about that. There's lots to talk about, and it's only been 2 or 3 games for most teams, so it's already an exciting season, and it's always super nice to get out of the off season. Always nice to watch some real meaningful hockey again.
For sure. And just before we get into all of that, just going to note that if you are here from our previous episode, the fantasy draft, because we did notice that got a decent amount of views compared to our other episodes. If you are here from that and you would like to see more fantasy hockey content in the future, do let us know down in the comments because we would definitely love to do that. And we were trying to get another episode similar to that out before the regular season began, but just didn't have time. So if you are interested in that sort of content, let us know and we can definitely do some more of that. Now, Jordan, you've got the Winnipeg Jets jersey on today, so I think we have to start with the big Jets news from a few days ago, which was that Scheifele and Hellebuyck are both staying for another 8 years. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good. I feel like I personally have been traumatized as a fan being an Ottawa and Winnipeg fan, where no one ever wants to stay in those two cities half the time. I think that narrative's changing in Ottawa, but I know in Winnipeg it's really hard to retain talent just because of the weather, frankly, and it just doesn't have a good perception around the league. So it's really, really important for those reasons to get players like Hellebuyck and Scheifele signed up for that amount of time. I understand that a lot of fans probably wanted a rebuild or even a retool using those players as your highest valued assets. But I think with what you're getting out of Cole Perfetti and what you're hopefully getting out of Gabe Vilardi, you still have Ehlers, you have Connor that are right in their primes. I think you can build around this and augment the core to hopefully go on another deep run. And I'm a really big fan of Rick Bowness. So I feel like it was the right decision overall. And it just leads other players to be more incentivized with maybe signing with the Jets. If you have these two top NHL players deciding to stay there, then maybe it turns a little bit more heads. Maybe they're just kind of okay, that's intriguing. Maybe there's a reason to stay in Winnipeg, whereas that wouldn't have happened before. So I think on so many levels, it's extremely important for the franchise.
Yeah, as you said about players actually wanting to stay, I have to say, and I might have said already on the show before that I really wasn't expecting either of these guys to re-sign, and I thought they were going to be in the position of having to trade them at the deadline. So that's totally out the window now. Were you surprised? Because I was kind of surprised that they both signed. I thought that maybe Scheifele would be more inclined to stay because he's just been there his whole career, and I guess Hellebuyck has too, but I don't know, I got more the vibe that Scheifele as the first line center, it's kind of his team, whereas Hellebuyck might be as a goalie being kind of tired of carrying the team on his back. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I was kind of surprised.
No, I think that does make sense. I didn't think either of them would sign, but I would have to say that the chances of Hellebuyck signing rang I thought that was impossible. I thought he was as good as gone. He's given his most productive years to this franchise. And I thought he had every right to go elsewhere and explore maybe going on a deeper run with a better core. I thought him in New Jersey were potentially a really good fit. So I was really surprised. And Scheifele less surprised because I thought there's a chance he stays. I think he does. He's always seemed to show that he likes Winnipeg. So I thought that there was a higher chance. Didn't expect it though. This came completely out of left field. And as a Jets fan, I'm really excited about it. I think it is crucial to this team's further development to have these top end players stay in this city. So I think it's an excellent signing. Maybe like a tad like too long in term, but you have to pay term nowadays to get good players. So I feel like that's just a common problem around the league, and I'm like ecstatic. I think they're great contracts.
Yeah, and I think most people would agree that Hellebuck is easily the second best goalie in the league behind Andrei Vasilevsky. And when you look at the cap hit, I think it was 8.5, right?
Yes, it was.
So that ranks as kind of second, kind of third, because you have Carey Price as the top goalie cap hit, which kind of doesn't even count anymore at the 10.5 million. So among goalies who are actually active, then you have Bobrovsky at the 10 million and Vasilevsky at the 9.5 million. So Hellebuck coming in at cheaper than both of those guys. Like obviously Bobrovsky is overpaid, but Vasilevsky, who being the best goalie, and Hellebuck is making a whole million less than him. And you could even debate as who do you think is better. It's just that Vasilevsky has been on the better team with the playoff success. I look at that and that's an amazing contract.
Yeah, no, I think so too. And I mean, granted, I don't think Bobrovsky or Carey Price are great comparables anymore.
No.
But I think being in second behind Vasilevsky proves that he maybe took a bit of a pay cut. There were rumors too that if he went to the open market, he can make 10.5 mil. So I think he definitely took a bit of a discount, but I did hear that a big thing with Hellebuck as well was knowing that Scheifele was going to stay. So I think the fact that both of them committed, it brought down their numbers a little bit. And I mean, it's great. Like that's what you want. You want your two best players committing long term. And I think they're both great contracts. Scheifele just scored 40 goals, so him at 8.5 as well is not a bad thing. That kind of makes sense. Again, it might hurt at the end of it, but I think it's something that you have to do if you're the Jets. Like it's contracts that you have to sign to keep those players around, just symbolically, even above whatever you put on the ice, right? So.
Yeah, and even if you're kind of hurting at the end of those contracts, the thing is the cap is going to be up in a few years. Like 8.5 for Scheifele, soon second liners might be getting close to that 7 million, 8 million range. And then if he's declining and you need to trade him, you just retain a little bit, like 1 or 2 million on the last couple of years, and you can probably move that deal if he's still at least a decent player that another team would want. So I feel like these contracts are just win-win for the players and the teams. Exciting times in Winnipeg, where like I said in my predictions, in the prediction videos that we did, if anyone saw those, I was saying that Winnipeg was going to be in the wild card race the whole way until the deadline, but then I was thinking that these guys were not going to want to stay and they were going to be on their way out, but that is not happening. So now it is going to be pretty exciting in Winnipeg for the next few years, I think.
Oh yeah, no, I think so too. And like, honestly, it's crazy. Like after 2 games in a couple of weeks, how much I think my predictions have changed. There's a lot of things that I would maybe slot in differently just based off those couple of weeks. It's crazy what happens with the NHL season gets going. And that's also a great point in how the cap is going up, how those contracts are not going to look as bad in a couple of years. They're going to maybe even look good. They're going to be underpayments. And I mean, I gave the Matthews contract, I gave them crap about it because it was the opposite where it's ending way too soon. And that's just going to go up to the top of the cap percentage when that gets renegotiated in 4 years. So I have to give them praise for that. That's a good point as well. Speaking of Matthews, though, 6 goals in 6 games. I remember I left him off my Art Ross, or I forget the Rocket. The Rocket.
Damn, off the Rocket too.
Off the Rocket.
That's already a bad prediction.
Off the Rocket. I was really disappointed in his season last season. I just didn't see a desire in him to play well. I feel like he's a player that fades away when things get difficult, and that's just been routinely shown in the playoffs. I got to give him credit though. 6 goals in 2 games. Pretty impressive. Like you can't really give him shit for that. Like he's playing at a top level. He's carrying his team with him. Is that all the Maple Leafs are, I guess, is the question, but it's still, you got to give him a pat on the back for that.
And we're recording this a couple hours before they're about to play the Chicago Blackhawks. And I mean, the Blackhawks' first couple of games have been decent. They haven't been absolutely blown out yet, but I will be kind of surprised if Matthews doesn't just eat that defense and goaltending alive. Like, I'm expecting at least another 2 goals for him tonight, which if he does that or better, it's going to be a ridiculous start. I think it's the NHL record or whatever, or no one has ever done 3 hat tricks in a row to start the season. I think maybe someone else had done 2 as well. So he could set history if he smokes the Blackhawks tonight, but this will be out probably after that game, so we won't know yet, but everyone watching will know by this point. Austin Matthews, just, instant Rocket frontrunner. Somehow Brock Besser with 4 goals in the first game too. I don't know if he's going to stay in the running as well. We also got Brady Tkachuk with 4 goals, and then Teuvo Teravainen with 4 goals as well. Kind of some random names in there, but I'm going to be a little biased and say that Brady is the most likely to stay near the top goal scoring ranks out of him, Besser, and Teravainen. I don't know, that might be too much bias. Maybe Brock Besser can finally live up to that potential that everyone has wanted to see from him, but it's going to be interesting to watch this goal scoring race, unless of course Matthews just keeps it up and keeps flying ahead of everyone else, right?
Exactly. It's hard to make any proclamations after 2 games, but 6 goals, 2 hat tricks. It's like, this might be, especially after the Chicago game tonight, this might be something that he pulls ahead a little bit in the next couple nights. But I do love that bullishness on Brady though. Like, I think he could score 40 this year, so yeah. I have to give him respect as well. But
with the hot start, you have to at least say it's possible. I wouldn't even have predicted it at the beginning of the season, but he's looking good so far.
He's looking impassioned, and that's the biggest thing with Brady. He brings that intangible to the ice each and every game, and he never gives anything less than 100%. So I think if his skill has finally caught up to that, we could see a really productive season from Brady. Mm-hmm. Moving on to the next quick point, I guess. Mackenzie Blackwood, a 50 save performance against Colorado. Crazy. I remember Mackenzie Blackwood being on the Devils, and for a while I was always really, really sad for him. He would get pummeled with shots. His numbers weren't even that bad. And he would be like the best player night in and night out. Nothing he could do. He would lose. He would not get great stats. However, the Devils got better, but Mackenzie Blackwood did not, which was, I guess, the main talking point. And that's why he's on the Sharks now. But, I mean, promising if you're a Sharks fan to see him performing well this early.
Yeah, that was an all-timer performance. I watched the highlights of that game, and it was just ridiculous save after ridiculous save. He had one on Makar with about 10 minutes left that was just unbelievable. And sadly, Makar did beat him with like 2 minutes left. I think they had the goalie pulled at that point. It was just, it was a perfect like seeing eye shot, right? As like 5 bodies all lined up right in front of Blackwood, totally blocking the vision, and Makar put it like right in the top corner. So that's even the goal that he got beat on in that game was something that no goalie would have been able to see. So amazing performance from him. And yeah, like you said, I kind of feel bad for him because when the Devils sucked, he was like easily their best player. He had that one really good season where it's like, oh, this guy is going to be the next elite goaltender for Canada. And then as the Devils got better, he had the injury troubles and he became inconsistent. So even though the Devils are like a President's Trophy contender now, he had to get moved on from. They didn't even want to keep him around as the backup, which kind of sucks. So now he is unfortunately playing for another bad team. Hopefully he can have some nights where he doesn't have to make 50 saves and completely carry the team. Just for his sake, I hope that the Sharks can at least be a little bit decent and make the workload lighter on him, but I don't know if they'll be able to do that looking at that D-core.
Yeah, no, that's the big question. Their D-core is probably joint worst in the league, maybe with Philly, maybe even worse, frankly. So he's going to have his work cut out for him. And I mean, I watched the highlights too. And as a goalie, like it's when you see a goalie pop off like that, I understand the feeling. Like you just feel in the rhythm. You feel like anything is savable, even if it's the most incredible chance. So I feel like if he's really feeling himself after that, hopefully that extends to multiple games. I feel like he has the confidence and the skill to pull it off based on what we've seen in the past. So, I mean, best of luck to him. And I hope he doesn't get too pelted behind that D-core because it's definitely something I could see happening consistently.
Mm-hmm. And I guess if we want to go from talking about some great goaltending to the worst goaltending ever, I feel like we should throw it to the start of the season that the Edmonton Oilers have had with 2 bad losses to the Vancouver Canucks. And it was the Wednesday night when that first game happened. I was doing Game Over Ottawa, and right as I was finishing up, I was like, oh, I'm going to turn on the Oilers-Canucks game. That should be a good one to watch. And then I look at the
Mm-hmm.
score right after finishing the show, and I just see 4-0 on like 12 shots or whatever it was. And I laughed my ass off just because it was Jack Campbell starting in net, and he was getting hyped up like, oh, he had this great preseason, and everyone's like, all right, Jack Campbell's going to be back. And it just collapsed immediately. Like, I almost couldn't believe it just because it was so bad, but I kind of could believe it too because he was like this all of last season.
Yeah, I mean, you're a bigger Edmonton fan than I am, so I usually default to you whenever something happens in their world, but it's pretty hard to ignore an 8-1 loss to start off the season. An incredible Jack Campbell performance after that. I'm glad I didn't pick him in fantasy again this year. My God.
Oh, God.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this always happens with the Oilers. Like they always are really hyped because of their top end talent. And then they always start off the season poorly. It always takes them a little bit to get going. And I still think like it's way too early to call anything on them. Like they have a 2% shooting percentage through those games. That's not going to stay the same. It's going to probably even out at around 10, like the league average and things like that. But the goaltending, like, geez, and even like the rest of the play around them, like the defense has been like watching some of those goals, their turnstiles. It's pretty bad. And I mean, hopefully it's just some early season hiccups, but like, what do you feel about that? Like, do you feel like this is more of the same Edmonton Oilers underachievement, or do you feel like this is something that you just need to give it a little bit more time and they'll start to rev up into game for them?
Yeah, for whatever reason, like I would have to look at the previous season's first few games to confirm, but I feel like the Oilers always start off kind of slow and the defense is always kind of just dog crap for the first month or so, and then they eventually figure it out. So I somewhat think that maybe it's just an issue with this core of just kind of starting slow at the beginning of the season. Like they've had a few seasons where they had to fire the coach, like Ken Hitchcock didn't last very long. And who was it after that? Who was the other guy before Woodcroft?
I remember his face. Is it something Tippett?
Yeah, Tippett. Like, again, they keep
Yeah.
having this pattern where they have a good season with a coach once he starts, and then the next season it's a slow start. And Woodcroft is in his third season now, but even last year, too, I remember it was a little bit of a slow start. And people were wondering if it was just a one-year wonder for Woodcroft, but they managed to turn it around, so I think they'll be able to do it again. I would say probably the only excuse I could come up for the Oilers, if not that they need excuses, but there was at least Matthias Ekholm is starting the season injured. He didn't play at all in the first game, and then in the second game, he only played 15 minutes, so they're kind of easing him in. I do have to think that if he was healthy from the start, they still would have lost, but it would have been a little bit better if you had him out there fully healthy playing 25 minutes a night instead of having to overplay your other guys like Bouchard and Cece and Nurse, who are not bad players, but Ekholm is like that guy. He's the guy who you want to be the minute muncher. That's why they brought him in last season. So I think that does affect it a little bit too, but also the goaltending just wasn't doing them any favors either. Like we talked about Campbell, but then Stuart Skinner followed that performance up with 4 goals against on 16 shots in the next game, so he wasn't any better. And like I was saying about one-year wonders, Edmonton fans might be worried that he might be one of those too.
Yeah, I mean the goaltenders that Edmonton has gone through, it's a rough list. Like they had Devin Dubnyk before he was good. They had Koskinen. They gave him way too much money to stay around. They had Mike Smith at the tail end of his career, and he did really badly in the playoffs. And you think maybe you find some consistency in Stuart Skinner, and that's what you need. You need a goalie now because you've had so many problems. You even brought in Jack Campbell, and he immediately did poorly. Like it's crazy what's happening over there with goalies. But I mean, I agree. I agree with you. Like I think Ekholm is probably like their 1D at this point. One shutdown D at the very least. And not having him play a significant amount of time certainly hurts them. I think once the lineup is probably more consistent with him playing higher minutes, it's probably going to be less bleeding goals as it is right now. I don't think this is representative of how they're going to be the entire season.
I agree. And we do have to give a bit of credit to the Canucks too, because this is a team that I was also just pretty much discounting in my regular or preseason predictions. I was not expecting them to do much at all in the regular season, just kind of be one of those teams that's floating around 500 for the whole year, because other than Elias Pettersson, Quinn Hughes and maybe JT Miller, who some people love, some people hate. I wasn't super impressed with the depth of their roster or the decor, and then we don't know if Thatcher Demko will be able to get back to elite form, but amazing start to the season for them, and they got to be hoping that they can actually turn that into some momentum to have a chance at the wildcard spot.
Yeah, I mean, I was impressed with what they've been doing so far, and Elias Pettersson and JT Miller have really shown up the first two games. They have like, I think Pettersson has like 7 points, and I forget how many JT has, but it's also an insane amount. So like that's an incredible start, and I mean, Thatcher Demko played sick. Dude threw up in his mask, which is
That's right.
gross, but like he's putting it all in there. So that effort, I have to respect it, for sure. So hopefully Vancouver can do something. But continuing on the trend of goalies, we're going to move on to another team that's having maybe a questionable goalie situation right now, which is the Buffalo Sabres. Devin Levi has not been great to start the season. Obviously, like not his fault. It takes like the entire team to really put in that effort to defend around him. It doesn't sound like the defense has been great so far, but not a great start. And for a team that doesn't really have a lot to recover from with their backup goalie, they don't really have like a veteran presence to stabilize that. You kind of wonder if Devin Levi is in the solution, how does that go for the rest of the season?
Yep, that's been my number one criticism of the Sabres, is that they're putting too many eggs in the Devin Levi basket immediately. You have Eric Comrie, who isn't going to be the solution if Levi falters, and then Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, who is probably also not really ready to take the starter role similar to Levi, even though I'm sure he could be decent in limited minutes. So with Levi, basically they needed Levi to steal the show immediately to have a shot at the playoffs. And it's only 2 games, so I'm sure he will pick it up. And I wouldn't say that he was really bad in their first 2 games. It was just a matter of the defense for most of it, I would think. So I think Levi will be decent all year, but it's the type of thing where they're such a offensively oriented team that you probably need like an elite goalie to get them to the playoffs at this point, unless they really tighten up that defensive play. And if Levi can't do that, you have no one else to go to, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And Levi, I mean, he's a great prospect. He has tons of potential, but I did think it was a mistake to not have him surrounded by maybe someone that could play in a pinch, who is a veteran, has experience, to be like, okay, like if things are faulty, like if Levi's having some trouble, we can just put this guy in and maybe we'll be comfortable for a couple games. He's not going to be like a world beater, but someone who's like can stabilize the net a little bit. And honestly, like if Craig Anderson didn't retire, I think he kind of would have been perfect. Maybe a younger Craig Anderson, but
Yeah.
even like that kind of goalie is like what I'm talking about. Like even though Cam Talbot was really bad for the Sens last year, I feel like he would have been like a good shout for like only like $1 million or something, just to have that just guy who's been like, I've been a starter before. I know what it's like. I know how to kind of put the pressure on myself a bit more so that this kid doesn't have to bear the reins of the entire season. You know, it's like a 1A, 1B sort of situation. Whereas it's just kind of like, Levi, it's up to you. If this doesn't go well, like the entire team suffers for it. And that's a lot of pressure. And it doesn't surprise me that the numbers haven't been great. But like you said, it's probably more of a defensive question. And I don't think this is where the numbers are going to stay. But for people like myself and you that kind of predicted that only going in with that one goalie mindset might hurt them, especially a rookie goalie, so far that mindset has been proven to be at least a little accurate to start the season.
Yeah, I was thinking the exact same thing about Craig Anderson. If he was 2 or 3 years younger and was still going to hang around a little bit longer, he would have been perfect, but the timing just didn't match up where Levi was not ready yet while Anderson was still here, and then Anderson is ready to go as in retire as soon as Levi shows up. So that was a little unfortunate for them, but I agree about like the Cam Talbot thing. If they could have gotten a goalie more like that, I think that would have been good. The only thing was that they already had Eric Comrie on the books for 1.8 million. So so they're probably kind of stuck with him in the offseason. Like I doubt that anyone wanted to trade for that because he's not like super proven. I think he had some injury issues again last season. So it seemed like they kind of just had to go with what they got, and it's going to be interesting to see if Levi can turn things around and become. He basically has to be like a Calder candidate up there with Connor Bedard if they want to make the playoffs, I think. And then from there, I also want to call out a team who actually hasn't had bad goaltending, because that's what we've mostly been talking about. But the Seattle Kraken have actually had really good goaltending in their first 3 games, and yet they're winless. They've only scored 2 goals. Are you shocked by this?
I'm a little shocked, admittedly. I felt like Seattle was a team where they don't really have like one superstar, maybe Veneers. But besides that, they don't have like a superstar, like one player that really pushes their offense specifically. They're kind of like a tandem group. Like their depth is what gets you. They can fire on all lines. And they're at least all defensively competent. So I was thinking, like, if Veneers in the first line isn't going, then maybe the second line is going or the third line is going, but that just hasn't happened. It's been a rough start for them. 2 goals for, like you said, and 9 against. It's not really because of their goaltending so far. It's just, it feels like they aren't playing very structured. They're just kind of letting the game come to them a lot instead of really taking over games. Like, they're just surviving out there right now.
And a couple of the losses too, like first game I think was against Vegas, so you can excuse that, but then they lose to Nashville and St. Louis. Like, those are the teams that you should be ahead of. But if you're not going to play up to the standard you were at last year, those are going to be 2 teams that you might be competing with for a wild card spot. Like, they're not horrible teams, but they are teams that, based off of last year's standings, you were way better than. So I think dropping those games to teams that they should have beat based off of last year is a really rough start for them. It makes me think that they might just be they might have the fall off that Vegas never had. But it's a little too early to say, because you are right that they have really good offensive depth, and I'm sure at least one of those lines will wake up pretty soon and get them some goals, even if it might be a case where like one line gets hot for a few weeks and then they kind of go cold, but then another line picks it up, and they just happen to all have started cold at once, which kind of sucks. But I don't know. This is interesting. It's going to be really intriguing to see over the next couple of weeks if they can actually turn it around, because 0-2-1, if they lose like even 2 of the next 4 games, it's still going to be looking pretty ugly, even though like 2-2 out of 4 games on paper sounds okay, but you add that to the 0-2-1 and then it's looking pretty sketchy. So
that is interesting. Yeah, for sure. And like in an offense by committee, it's pretty disheartening to see not a lot of offense come from it. And I mean, the defense and goaltending have kind of done their jobs for the most part. Like, only scoring 2 goals, like, how are you going to win games like that, right? Like in 3 games, that's crazy. So I mean, I feel like it's hopefully will just take time for their veterans like Eberle, Yanni Gourde to come out and just kind of stabilize the team a little bit by showing off their offensive flair. But still, like, this is not a place you want to be. And you're right. Like, if they lose 2 more games and 2-4-1, that's still pretty bad. And I know they're still like probably favored to make the playoffs because their division isn't as strong. But yeah, you don't want to be dropping points to these teams. You want to show why you win as far as you did last year in these early games, set your standard. And they haven't really done that. It's been a lot of faulty play. And I mean, hopefully it improves, but they got to really turn it around. Like, they got to pull 180 quickly, because I think it's very important to get your season started off well. Being an Ottawa Senators fan, I know it's super important. Get your season started off well. It'll come back to bite you if you don't. So, I mean, hopefully with that veteran leadership, they can right the ship, but I guess we'll see.
And since you mentioned the Sens, I figure we might as well get into that a little bit too, about starting the season off well. They've got the 2-1-0 record, which, considering the opponents they've played, I think is about as good as you could ask for. Like, if we were 3-0-0 and had beaten the Hurricanes, that would have been amazing, but that is a really tough team to beat, so it's a little bit excusable. At least that game was close. But how are you feeling about the Sens start so far?
I'd say cautiously optimistic is the best way to say it. I feel like they've won the games that they should and lost the one to Carolina, where it's like, okay, you can lose that one. Like, we understand. How they lost it wasn't great, admittedly. And it seemed to reflect a lot of old habits that we don't love around here. But besides that, like, the game against the Flyers, probably a little bit too close for a majority of the game, but they played well enough and they got the win in the end. That's what matters. The game against Tampa, again, probably would have preferred if they pulled away in the second period. Instead, their second period was pretty awful and got Tampa back in the game, but they cleaned it up in the third. And frankly, Brady Tkachuk just said, we're winning this game, and took it upon himself to score he's an animal, honestly. Like the dude's a monster, and I mean he brings the team to play every night. And I honestly, like in the future, I could see him being the difference in a playoff series, just Brady. And I mean you've seen it with Matthew before too, but I think he's getting to that level. But yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic. We've seen a lot of good things. I just want it to be sustainable. What are your thoughts, Mon?
Yeah, I pretty much agree. It's a interesting pattern with the Sens, and I don't know if other fan bases notice this or think this about their teams too, but we always feel like as Sens fans that even after we have a good start in a game and we're up by like 1 or 2 goals, it feels like the team is never really able to pull it away and just make it like a 3-0, 4-0 lead or whatever. It's always like the other team just kind of hangs around a little bit, even if they're not getting a lot of shots on goal or offensive pressure, like we saw in the Flyers and Tampa games. Like both of those games, when the opponent got their second goal, which in the Flyers game made it 3-2, and in the Tampa game tied the game about halfway through, both times the teams had like 10 shots each. And so you see the ability for the Sens to take over games, but they don't seem to have that ability to just pull away and put the other team, in the dirt and just leave them in the dust, right? I think that Brady Tkachuk is going to be a huge help with that, his development. We already know he's a great leader, and if he can just continue to have those moments where he really just takes over on the ice, like both of his goals against Tampa Bay, especially that second one was a huge game changer because that was really when Tampa was still hanging around. I believe in Brady. All my trust is in Brady, to lead this team, and hopefully getting some more of our offensive depth back in Norris and Pinto, which who the hell knows how that's going to go. Hopefully when we do get them back, that will help a little bit in terms of being able to actually pull away in games where you're dominating. Just from having better offensive players out there, maybe they'll finish some more chances.
And that's the hope. And I mean, that's why you have to put a little asterisk even against the Carolina loss, because you didn't have your number 2 center or your number 3 center. The fact that it's like this is pretty laughable. Like, I can't believe that they still haven't figured something out. You can predict Norris. That's just a shitty situation. But with Pinto, you'd hope he'd already be in the fold. But they've shown up. Like, it's been closer than I would like, but they've shown up. Their players have been good. Their defense has been pretty decent. The goaltending has been stable, which has been a big thing that we haven't had the past couple of seasons. Like, both Forsberg and Korpisalo in the last 2 games were not tested that much, but when they were, they came up big. Like they neither of them gave us a chance to lose that game. And I feel like that's the biggest narrative here. I feel like last season, the last couple of seasons, these games against the Flyers and Tampa, where it was close, like into the third period even, those are classic Sens losses where you dominate and you get disheartened and they just don't go for the kill. They don't finish it. There's another goal in the third period from the other team that leads to overtime and they lose it that way, or they just completely fall apart. I remember the Rangers game from 2 years ago, I think in particular, or maybe that was last season even, where they were up like 3-2 in the third period and then they lost like 5-3 or 5-2 or something like that, just because they couldn't hold it together. So I think that's really comforting to see them have these types of games where I would say 9 times out of 10, that's a Sens loss if you're going to this position in the third period. To see that slowly shift is important. And I think it shows the depth throughout their lineup. They're not so reliant on their top 2 lines to keep them in games. They're able to score from other places as well. And that should hopefully be enhanced when Norris and Pinto come back. So for those reasons, cautiously optimistic. You need to see this sustainable though. Like, we were up, I think 4-2 last season in November, and then that became like 5-14-2 or something by the end of it. So you have to stay consistent, have to stay above 500. Those are the most important things.
And it's going to be interesting with the schedule too, because we have so many home games before going to Sweden. I feel like the league did us a bit of a solid with that in terms of potential to get off to a good start. But then the thing now I'm kind of worrying about, even if we do have a good start with all those home games, after we come back from Sweden, and then suddenly it's going to be a crap ton of road games and like long road trips and stuff to make up the balance between home and away games. I'm worried that we're going to fall apart at that point, because I feel like over the last few seasons, even when we were bad, we were significantly better on home ice than we were on the road. And hopefully just having a better roster at this point will help that. But it seems like a bit of maybe a mental thing with this team, where they're just way better with the home crowd behind them. And the road, not necessarily the best results. I remember doing a lot of shitty road games last season on Game Over. Like the loss against the Sharks, I think, was 5-1 on the road. The Western road trip at the end of last season too, which obviously you remember too. We did one of those shows together. So
that was fun.
That kind of thing worries me, but hopefully like those first 2 home games have been really encouraging in terms of the team's ability to at least get off to a good start. Hopefully they at least give themselves a cushion here so that if they go in a long stretch of road games and they can if they have like a 7 or 8 game road trip or something, if they can at least be around 500 during that, then we'll be okay, you know? Hopefully we get that cushion.
Yeah, I think that's important. And I mean, I remember, I think like even the last couple of seasons, even when the Sens were in like bottom 10 of the standings, they would have like a positive home win record. It'd be like 21-20 and something. And then their away record would be abysmal, like 10-25 or something like that. Like, so they need to clear up their performance on the road. I think that's definitely crucial to them making the next step. And hopefully making the playoffs. They have a lot of teams to beat for that, which leads me to, I think, the last team we'll discuss today, which is the Florida Panthers. They as well are 2-0. They've scored 4 goals, allowed 8. So it's been not awful in that department, but still in 2 games, 4 goals is not amazing. And I mean, I just really feel for them because they've been injured to hell and back. And I don't know. I'm not sure what to expect from them this season, to be honest.
Yeah, the Panthers got totally smoked by the Jets the other day. They got a couple of late goals with the goalie pulled to make the score look a little bit decent, but they weren't able to fully complete the comeback. And the thing with this team is that it's already a really offensive-oriented team, but then you're missing your best offensive defenseman in Brandon Montour for probably until December, and then your second best with Aaron Ekblad as well. Like, I don't think we're supposed to see either of them play until at least December. Maybe one of them will make a quicker return, and that could help them out a lot. But they really need to make sure that they don't just get totally sunk in the first part of the season with this subpar decor that they're running out there. Like, not very many puck movers on this back end. Like, their stopgap solutions for replacing Montour and Ekblad is like Mike Riley and Oliver Ekman-Larsson, who are both pretty washed, in my opinion. I mean, maybe OEL can be decent on like a $2 million cap hit. Maybe he will be worth that compared to his previous contract. But I just see like their decor is pretty much a wasteland right now other than Forsling. And they lost Radko Gudas too, who brings a solid element, a guy who always sticks up for his teammates, and you need that too. And the goaltending as well, like no one really thinks that Bobrovsky is going to keep up his form from the playoffs. Then the backup is Anthony Stolarz. He's a good backup, but he's not going to be able to take over if Bobrovsky is totally trash. Spencer Knight is starting in the AHL, so they better hope that he can get back to the top of his game soon because they might need him up here. I don't think anyone trusts Bobrovsky at all at this point. So I just feel like there's so many question marks with this team that I think they're going to continue to have a bad start, which might be a little bit of hope as a Sens fan because we just want them out of the picture for this year. But I don't see a lot of reasons to be optimistic. If they can at least be like 500 until Montour and Ekblad are back, and maybe you call up Knight at that point too. If they can be around 500, I do think they have the potential to go on a run after that and have a shot at the wild card, but I don't think their start is going to be very good. 0-2, it'll improve a little bit, but I don't think they're going to have a great record in the first couple months.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me with the losses they've had. It's a lot to put on the back of Matthew Tkachuk. To be like, yeah, you're the main person on this team now. You get them wins. There's not a lot of depth there on the defense to really support that. And I mean, they have decent forward depth, but I mean, I could be wrong, but I feel like them making it to the finals was like very Montreal-esque, where like the right things happened at the right time that willed them there. The performances, to be fair, from Montour, Tkachuk, Ekblad, Bobrovsky really put them in that position. I don't think it's sustainable. I think you're seeing more of the real Panthers here, unfortunately. And I have nothing against them. I hope they do well, but I feel like this fall off, like if it does continue, is not exactly something that no one couldn't see coming. I feel like it's fairly predictable. And I mean, I think it sucks for Florida fans because you make it to the Stanley Cup Finals and then you lose out on a bunch of promise because like it wasn't like you're necessarily supposed to be there, and you see the injuries that carried over from that are impacting you right at the start of this season. Like it kind of feels like that was your chance and then it's gone, you know? I kind of hope I'm wrong. I do like the Panthers for this season. Maybe they could take a step aside for Ottawa. I would appreciate it. But otherwise, I feel like they do have players that are really likable there that you want to do well. Like even to some extent, players like Matthew and Sam Bennett and even Reinhart, like those players really put in the effort day in and day out. And you want to see them rewarded for it, but they just don't have the depth to circumvent the rest of their roster at this point. And I mean, you're going to get eaten alive in the Atlantic. That's just the state of things. So you got to play above your head or you're going to drown.
You know, you compared them to that Montreal Canadiens Stanley Cup run from a couple years ago, but then that also got me thinking that I think they're comparable to the 2017-18 Sens when they had that great playoff run where they were one game away from the finals and then they totally collapsed the next season because on paper that team still had really good offense like the Panthers, but you had Erik Karlsson playing completely injured in the playoffs and somehow still being amazing, kind of like Ekblad and Montour, and you had some players kind of on their last legs, you know, like I said,
Bobby Ryan.
Yeah, Bobby Ryan, and we don't expect Bobrovsky to continue this form. It would be an incredible resurgence if he did, but it more seems just like a guy who's been inconsistent being able to have a hot streak for a couple of months. And the injuries too, so many injuries for the Sens during that playoff run that people were playing through, where they just weren't as good at the beginning of next year, like Karlsson. So, and also we lost Mark Mathot after that season. They lose Radko Gudas. I'm not going to say that they're like on the same level, but they're that gritty defensive D. Will the Panthers be able to replace him? Because the Sens were not able to replace Mathot at all. They just didn't have the depth for it. So I don't know. I think it could be a similar situation where now it's not going to be such a disaster where they end up having to rebuild like the Sens did. I think they do have the capability to bounce back next year, but I think it is a little bit similar.
Yeah, no, that's a really good comparison, actually. I feel like this season might be a bit more of a write-off, and at least they didn't make a Duchesne trade, so they don't need to worry about the drafting position.
They need to avoid any mistakes like that, doing anything rash.
Actually, that reminds me though, they don't have the first round pick, do they? Because they traded
is that
till like 2025.
Let's see.
They traded a bunch of them. Like
I have the cap friendly open, so let's see. That's bad. They don't have 2024 or 2025 first round picks.
Okay, I didn't think so. So yeah, that's kind of rough. Like in a season where you might not do as well because of injuries, you won't get that first round pick like injection of talent in a couple of years. Unless they trade, like maybe they're bad at the deadline and they trade something to recoup a first. But like, yeah, that's makes that season a little bit more rough overall. But granted, like for everything we've talked about today, it has been 2 games for most teams in the NHL season, most 3, I think. So all of this is really subject to change, but that's kind of the point of this podcast, is to kind of just to give you a weekly recap of what's happened. So yeah, like next week we could be talking about how Buffalo, Seattle, Florida, Edmonton have just won their next 3 games and they're looking like world beaters now. But yeah, all that to mean, take what we're saying here with a grain of salt at this point in time, but it's going to be interesting to see where Florida ends up with those injuries, with that lack of personnel. They're an interesting team to watch in the nightmare division that is the Atlantic.
That's what I think is going to be fun about this podcast, is that we're going to be trying to do it semi-regularly, so we will have the opportunity to be very reactionary and that's just true. You know, as narratives change throughout the season, as teams go on hot streaks or cold streaks, we can just react to that in real time. And sometimes it's not always going to be perfect takes. We're going to have takes that age poorly too. Like I'm sure some of our preseason predictions might look stupid right now just because, you know, the Canucks are 2-0 or something like that, which I didn't expect. But again, we give credit to them for having a great start to the season. It's only 2 games, so we'll see where they go from here. And then, hey, in one of the future episodes, we'll come back to the Canucks and see how they're doing then.
It's true. And I mean, yeah, with predictions, my Rockets looking really good, leaving Matthews off entirely. Yeah.
Oh, God. Yeah, we'll see if Austin Matthews is in double-digit goal totals yet by the time we do our next episode in 5 days. Yeah.
That could be embarrassing. So, Yeah, hopefully not, but we'll see. Playing Chicago, it's tough to tell. He'll have the chances.
So yeah, I think that's where we're going to leave it for this episode. So much going on in the NHL just in the first week alone. Hard to cover everything, but I think those were some of the more interesting stories. If there are any topics that you would like to hear us talk about or anything kind of flying under the radar, do let us know in the comments. And yeah, we'll probably be back next week with some totally different topics, because what I like about this show is that we can talk about any team in the NHL. We're not locked down to any team. We got the Sens and the Jets gear, but we are following all teams. So it's nice to be able to have lots of different things to talk about. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. It's a great breadth of topics. And honestly, like, I was kind of surprised we were able to talk about as much as we did in a 2 to 3 game start to the season. So I feel like there's going to be lots to cover and lots of angles to explore. So yeah, I'm excited about it too. And if you guys have any questions or any ideas on how to improve the podcast overall, we definitely take it, and we take your ideas as well. So every engagement is appreciated.
For sure. Thank you everyone so much for watching or listening. You can find me on Twitter at Maude Show, Jordan on Twitter at Saint of Stutzla, and of course the podcast account at Extra Attackers. And yeah, that'll be it for this week.